Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 6th episode in which Naruto is physically too strong. There's something to say about being overly strong. When you have the ability to do whatever you want, you realize that you don't actually want to do anything. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Itachi frowned as he stared at his little brother. The boy was snarling as he ineffectually grasped at Itachi's face. He tried to pull off some moves, even going as far as swiping at his arm. But nothing Sasuke did held up against his older brother's superior arm length. Honestly, it was rather sad, but at least the boy had unlocked his Sharingan. That almost made Itachi not disappointed. "I'm going to rip off your head and defecate down your throat stump," Sasuke roared, which was impressive as Itachi was doing his level best to choke the boy. How he had so much air to continuously yell obscenities was beyond the Exanbu member. "And when I'm done, I'm going to rip out your eyes and shove them up your ass, just so you could get an understanding of how much of your bullshit I've had to deal with." Kisame, the feared monster of the hidden waves, could only stare in mute wonder. Below him was a bubblegum-haired ninja who even now was pushing against his mind, but he could honestly care less about the bug underneath his foot. Wow, that is a lot of rage. When Itachi spoke, it was around the spittle and curses that Sasuke was still somehow spurting out. He is a true Uchiha, despite his deficiencies. Kisame's brow rose. "You mean to say that your clan encouraged this? We foster such resentment?" Kisame didn't know how to answer that. He turned back to the girl under his heel to see her glaring up at him. If the man hadn't stared down much bigger, deadlier threats, he would have been intimidated by the venom in those green eyes. "I'm gonna make your brains bleed out through your ears," she muttered. Lithe fingers dug into the dirt, leaving a score of lines behind. "And when your head is finally rid of those last 2 cells, I'll suspend your body above our gate as a reminder to those who would dare to betray the hidden leaf." Kisame's eye drifted from the girl back to his nearly mute partner. Is everyone in your village like this?" Itachi shrugged. "Last time I was here, only I was like this." Glad to see the trend caught on. A contingent of ninjas landed in the middle of the street, likely in response to the commotion from the civilians. They took one look at the 2 missing ninja and snarled. "We're gonna skin you alive and make you into throw rugs," the lead ninja roared. Kisame stared, then sighed. "I should have known that your village would be this way. XXX The world was red. It was red, and black, and sometimes white. The sky was red, the moon was red, and though the ground was as black as tar. Her blood had flowed enough to dye it red." "Gah!" Aiko screamed. More blood dripped from her open mouth. The blade in her stomach retracted at the sound of her pain, and the wound sealed instantly with its absence. Still, the pain of the stab hadn't faded. It lingered and mixed with the hundreds of other times that the man before her had stabbed her. Judging by his chambered arm, he wasn't done with the torture either. "Arg!" Aiko screamed as the blade pierced her lung. Somewhere deep inside, her logical brain knew that it was all an illusion. Her wounds healed too quickly. The world was out of color. Time moved in weird ways. The pain, however, felt far too real. Her nerves burned, like a wildfire through a forest, and the acrid taste of bile was always just at the back of her mouth. Searing hot tears threatened to overflow from her eyes, and Aiko couldn't help but wonder just how extravagant this genjutsu was. You pansy." Aiko choked out. Her throat felt sore, like she swallowed sandpaper. The pain she was feeling was unbelievable, but it was something that she could tolerate. The Yamanaka were trained to withstand any amount of mental fatigue. The Uchiha, Itachi, she realized, didn't respond. He looked at her, his body in shades of red and white, and shrugged. He turned away, and his footsteps were silent as he marched away into the distance. For a second Aiko thought that her torture was over. Then the world lurched. Red and black and white blurred together in a chaotic whirlwind. Darkness bled away to reveal more vivid colors, and suddenly the first thing she saw was something incredibly noticeable. "The Hokage monument?" she muttered. Blue eyes darted back and forth, and familiar buildings came to the forefront. A bread shop, a ramen shop, yakiniku. She was in Konoha's main thoroughfare. What? She struggled, but she was still bound to a red and black cross. The civilians walked all around her, sparing her not even a glance. She sighed. So she was still in a genjutsu. She struggled once more against the binding, not minding at all the isolation in a crowded area, when a flash of orange stopped her. No. Suddenly scores of people fell by the dozens. Their eyes rolled to the back of their heads as claw marks rent their bodies asunder. Some people were felled as buildings collapsed on them, while still others simply melted where they stood. Their voices melted together in a cacophony of terror, and still Aiko did not fold. No, She stood strong until the orange appeared in her vision again. It glided through the masses like oil through water, before standing mere meters away from her. He looked around at the people suffering, then a wicked smile slowly crept across his face. Little Naruto leered at her as the village crashed around him. His blue eyes had turned red, and he held that monstrous man's sword in his hands. Before Aiko could say anything, he jabbed it into her abdomen. And this time Aiko didn't feel the stab in her skin. She felt it in her soul. XXX Kisame shifted backwards, letting the blade swipe at the air where he once was. With less effort than probably should be necessary, he hefted his Saitama into the air and brought it down. The resulting explosion blasted away every enemy combatant in front of him. "You leaf ninja are fun." The blue-skinned man roared. His smile was wide as he turned. Saitama opened its mouth and swallowed the fireball that was aimed at his back. It licked its lips as it savored the taste of the chakra. "Bring on more." Itachi, meanwhile, was having less fun. His Sharingan flickered back and forth as he kept track of the multiple ninjas jumping on him. He redirected several punches, throwing ninjas into other ninjas, then snatched kunai out of the air. In one fluid motion he tossed the knives into the throats of other enemy combatants, then used other ones to slash at ninja that came too close. This deadly dance continued for a few seconds more before the Uchiha Slayer became upset. A sequence of hand signs both began and ended in an instant, and a huge fireball barreled down the street. Most leaf ninja were engulfed by the flame. Kisame simply used his sword to eat the flames that came near him. "Your village is a riot, Itachi," Kisame roared. A surviving leaf ninja attempted to jump the distracted man. He was backhanded through a wall. The shark man hadn't even turned to acknowledge him. "If I knew it was this fun, I would have come so much earlier." Itachi didn't respond. Shuriken flipped into his hands and were released shortly after. The shadow clone technique turned his 10 or so shuriken into a wall of death that either waylaid the fresh wave of leaf ninja or incapacitated them. "We should leave," the Uchiha Saiyan finally said. His voice was soft, but Kisame heard it anyway. "Before the real monsters arrive," Kisame laughed. He swung Saitama onto his shoulder and swept his hand out over the destroyed thoroughfare. "Real monsters? What manner of man could possibly handle us two?" It was at that moment that Kakashi and Guy dropped into the clearing. Guy took one look at Kisame and shifted into the fifth gate. The ground cracked and the air rippled as power incarnate erupted from the green beast. What was all Kisame was able to get out before he was slammed with upwards of 200 pounds of pure muscle. Saitama was brought up and it blocked the kick, but the resulting momentum carried the two through several buildings and out of sight. Itachi looked at them go, then turned back to the other ninja staring him down. In the time that he looked away, Kakashi had flipped his headband up. The red of the man's stolen Sharingan looked back at him. "Your genjutsu won't work on me, Itachi," the man spat, his voice laced with venom. "I will bring you to justice." Itachi almost chuckled at the man's confidence. "You have an incomplete set, and an immature one at that." His own eyes then morphed into the Mangekyo. The three tomoe that surrounded his pupil turned into a star. The strain was immediate, however, and his vision turned blurry. The elder Uchiha let his power fade before looking back at the man. He shouldn't have used Tsukiyomi on that girl. "Still, I will entertain you, for a bit." Kakashi snarled at the younger man's words. Nothing else needed to be said, it seemed. He tensed, then the two blurred into motion. XXX Sarutobi Hiruzen, the leader of the Hidden Leaf Village and the professor, felt the need to massage his head. A headache of epic proportions was assaulting him from quite literally every side of his skull, and he felt that there was nothing he could do to assuage it. First the Chunin exams were put on hold and, hoo boy, was that a bad thing. Not only was it an embarrassment on a national scale, but it was an annoyance that he really wasn't willing to handle quite yet. Then two ranked ninjas decided to invade his village. True, one of them was probably on his side. Still, the rest of his ninja didn't know that, which meant that they would all probably be incapacitated. The amount of headaches that he would be getting from the hospital was already making him dizzy. A few casualties wouldn't even be a problem if the two morons would take out a couple of his subordinates and then leave, but they didn't. They were staying, and his stupid subordinates were still throwing themselves at them as if it would fix the problem. The way that things were going, he would have to go deal with this himself. He didn't want to. His chair was so comfy. Sarutobi Hiruzen rubbed at his temple. It wasn't a good day. He didn't like it. But such was the life of a Hokage. He rose from his, disgustingly comfortable, chair and roamed over to his window. Explosions and wanton destruction on an epic scale was erupting all over the town as his ninja tried to deal with a threat that would go away given the ability to. The amount of property damage was staggering. He knew that it was probably selfish to think solely of the numbers that would be involved with this incident, but he couldn't help it. No one would be fatally hurt by this phenomenon, so the life toll wasn't on his mind. So all that left was the paperwork. And the paperwork would be massive. The headache increased tenfold when he thought of the amount of time he would be trapped behind a desk resolving the bureaucratic side of things. Somehow, someway, he felt like this was Itachi's way of getting payback for not stopping the Uchiha massacre. He felt like he was right. Triple X Itachi sighed as Kakashi gasped at his feet. Cuts festooned the man's jacket and clothing, and blood flowed freely from the wounds. Still, he was conscious, and even now he was trying to swipe at the Exanbu with what little energy he had left. The Uchiha would feel proud of the man's tenacity had he not been the villain. He had a role to play, and never was he the one to shirk his duty. With this in mind, the man raised his foot and brought it down harshly on the man's head. The silver-haired Jonin grunted from the pain, before finally collapsing. Pathetic, Itachi said, his voice naught but a whisper. Still, with the amount of authority behind the voice, everyone in the now abandoned street heard him. I expected more of ninja from my hometown. Itachi's blood-red eyes then roamed to his little brother. Sasuke was posted against a wall, his teeth grit and eyes blurry, but alive. I expected more of you, little brother. Damn you, Sasuke yelled. He was the exact opposite of his brother in every way. Where Itachi stood tall and proud, Sasuke leaned heavily on a wall. Where Itachi radiated power and confidence, Sasuke struggled like a fallen lamb. Still, despite their differences, the younger Uchiha glared with all the venom of an apex predator as he stared down his older brother. He held no fear as he locked eyes with one of the most feared Nuka ninja in the world. I will kill you. I will take you down, no matter what it takes. Itachi smiled, though it was hidden under the massive hem of his cloak. He had the urge to pike the boy like he used to, but he had to quash it. Instead, the young man turned away. Your hatred is still too weak. You must have eyes like mine before no, Sasuke muttered. He pushed off the wall and took a couple of steps toward the rogue. He faltered, nearly falling to the ground, before catching himself. I will not take the same path to power that you did. I will not follow in your footsteps. The strength in his left leg faltered, and he almost collapsed to the ground. He braced himself with his hand before he fell completely, and slowly struggled back to standing. If I am to beat you, it will be through my own merit. If I am to beat you, it will be because of my own actions. He pounded his chest. His voice lowered, as did his gaze. Even if I have to become a monster. He choked on his last words, and his legs failed him once more. He couldn't catch himself this time, and he mentally braced himself as he pitched forward. Before he hit the ground, however, a pair of hands hooked under his arms. Sasuke felt himself being raised, not just by the physical might of the person, but by an otherworldly force. No, a familiar voice said. It was brash and slightly scratchy. No monsters here, only heroes. Yeah, another voice choked out. It came from behind, but it was no less strong for it. We will never succumb to your evil. We will never be like you. Sasuke turned to the person supporting him, and even through glazed eyes he could make out the fanged smile of Kiba Inuzuka. It was a forced thing, but it bolstered his confidence nonetheless. Akamaru, Kiba's furry little partner, barked his support. Sasuke didn't even need to turn around to feel the whisper of a voice in his mind. Sakura was back up, and she was ready to go. We might not be Naruto, Kiba started, his words coming out akin to a growl, but we're still plenty strong ourselves. We won't be beaten by the likes of you, rank ninja or not. Kiba then turned his intense gaze back to Sasuke. And you won't either, will you? What sense does it make to beat him if you just become another monster? Sasuke looked away, not wanting to show the shame in his eyes. Still, the question brought a smile to his face. For once, the dog breath was right. It didn't make any sense to give up now. Different path or not, he would still become a monster like the man before him. Mustering what little strength he had, he pushed himself off of his friend. Energy he did not have rushed through him, and he stood confidently once more. Yeah, he said around ragged breaths. He shifted into the flowing water, crushing rock stance and smirked. Let's see if we can't topple a monster. That's what I'm talking about, Kiba roared. He collapsed on all fours, with Akamaru doing the same on top of his head. We're going monster hunting, boy. Akamaru barked, the sound coming out as an excited yip. I failed against the last monster, Sakura said. Her voice was strong with her conviction. It rose into a shout as she spoke. I won't fail against this one. Snakes, sharks, sand demons. I don't care. Bring them all and more. I will crush them with my power. And then, just like that, an impressive power blared to life behind them. Without looking at her, Sasuke could practically taste the psionic power emanating from his pink-haired teammate. She was likely floating via the use of her powers, arms splayed and glowing green eyes trained on Itachi. The man, for all the power displayed before him, simply looked on. His red eyes were little more than bored as he watched the children squabble. "Are you quite done?" he asked. His eyes focused on Sasuke. "Friends will only hold you back." "Shut up," Sakura growled. She floated forward and raised her hand. "We don't fraternize with the enemy." Sasuke could feel the psionic energy leap from her hand. It crashed into Itachi like a freight train, actually pushing him back a couple of feet. Sakura grunted. "He's heavy." "Doesn't matter," Kiba growled. "Just keep him there." He then jumped forward. He started to spin halfway through his dash to the rogue ninja, before turning into a deadly twister. Itachi looked to move, but a blue film of energy enclosed around him, trapping him where he was. "Not so fast," Sakura said amidst a grin. Her hand was outstretched, closing around the Uchiha. "Fang over fang," Kiba roared, before barreling into the trapped Itachi. A cloud of dust erupted from the impact, and for a second both Sakura and Sasuke had to shield their eyes. The eruption soon ended, however, and the two preteens struggled to see through the persisting smoke cloud. Is he down?" Sakura asked. "I can't sense his mind." "No," Sasuke grunted. "He wouldn't go down from just that." He then bent his knees, before jumping into the cloud. Sakura reached for him, but it was no use. He was swallowed by the cloud before she could do anything. Sakura bit her lip. All she could now was wait. She tried to use her psionic powers to push away the dust, but nothing happened. So she waited. Luckily, not for long. Grab! Someone screamed from the dust. The smoke finally started to clear when it did, and Sakura was overjoyed when it did. Kiba was laid out on the side, his body twitching with Akamaru licking at his face to wake him. He was unconscious, but not injured, so that was good. Sasuke, however, was standing proudly, his kunai embedded into Itachi's stomach. "How do you like that, you bastard?" Sasuke snarled. A vindictive smile danced on his face as he spoke. "Who's weak now?" Itachi didn't say anything. Instead, he raised his hand and reached for the younger man. His arm was briefly encased in a blue aura, but like Orochimaru before him, he broke his restraints. Sakura grunted at the casual display of power. "You are stronger than I thought," Itachi spoke, but like usual his voice barely registered above a whisper. "But not strong enough. Though. I suppose this was a good warm-up." "Warmed on up?" Sasuke parroted. A bad feeling started to worm its way into his stomach. Something was wrong. He twisted the kunai, lurching it with all his strength. Just like before, the man hadn't even reacted. And then he burst into crows. "Fucking," Sasuke murmured. "Not this." Sakura made her way over. She was on guard. They lost sight of an extremely strong combatant, and that wasn't good. "This? What is this?" "A crow clone. It's a mixture of genjutsu and the cloning technique." "Of course he would," Sakura murmured. "A fail-safe defensive maneuver, he can switch with the crow clone whenever he needs in order to escape danger." "Brilliant. Can you sense him?" Sakura shook his head. "I couldn't sense him even when he was right in front of me. He's doing something to mask both his chakra and his thoughts." "DCH," Sasuke sucked his teeth. "Then we stay on guard. He can't be that far." Sakura nodded. The two shared a look before sprinting off. Kiba twitched where he was on the side of the road. "XXX, what the hell even are you?" Kisame asked. He swung his sword, a legendary blade made of sharp scales, rather than a single edge, and tried to crush the green freak. Unfortunately, said freak was faster. He moved out of the way. That wasn't what was frustrating Kisame, however. The man dodged the attack cleanly, seemed to be moving before the swing even started, but made a different decision once he was in the clear. He scrunched his massive eyebrows, rattled a single thought around an empty head, then moved back in the way of the blade. "I am Might Guy," the man roared. "I know," Kisame sighed. "You've announced yourself at least 15 times already. And I am the mighty green beast of Konoha." Kisame took one look at the garishly green spandex suit and winced. "You don't say? And in order to live up to young Naruto's expectations, I must be able to take any and all attacks, no matter where they come from." "On guard." "In what?" was all Kisame could get out before the green freak raised both of his heavily bandaged hands and caught his Saimata. "Okay, what?" Months of near-constant pounding from young Naruto has made me extremely resilient, Guy roared. Kisame stared at the man, wide-eyed. Dude, please rephrase that sentence. I see no need. Guy screamed, and boy, was that a scream. Kisame could already feel the headache forming from the man's still increasing volume. I am proud of the many beatings that young Naruto has given me. How does anyone in this village function with you around? Kisame muttered through grit teeth. A nearby ninja, recently fallen, groaned his agreement. With my new training on my side, I refuse to lose to the likes of unyouthful you. Gate of joy, open. And then any delusions that Kisame had about the man's power were literally blown away as Guy started to emanate pure power from his body. His skin turned even redder, and a green aura surrounded him. I am Might Guy, and I will not lose to the likes of you. Kisame barely had enough time to react before he was slammed into by the freak. What made it worse was that he was on fire now. Saitama whined as blow after blow rained on her, but Kisame could do little else under the impressive speed. Ha, most youthful one. How do you like being pounded? Okay, that's enough, Kisame groaned. He went through one-handed hand seals, before spitting out enough water to flood a river. The surprise attack pushed Guy back, but it wasn't enough to incapacitate him. He flipped in the air, righted himself, and prepared for another rush. And then stopped when he saw the shark-like sword fuse with the blue-skinned man. Within seconds Kisame was a shark man, and for once Guy was the one left speechless. You're some kind of freak, aren't you? He asked. Kisame could only roar in response. X the third Hokage grunted as he moved through the crowd. There were quite a lot of explosions where he was heading, but none were louder than Guy's screams, so he was at least certain that someone competent was handling the situation. The old man removed his hat, before handing it over to an Anbu that shadowed him. The man took it reverently, before helping the old man disrobe. Underneath his robes of office was an all-black getup that was lightly studded with plating. The third Hokage was going to war. You look weird out of your normal clothing, Gramps. The third Hokage was going back to his chair. He turned, faster than the eye could track, to see a tiny blonde walk past him. A bun-haired girl bowed and apologized profusely as she followed the walking nuke to the point of fighting. Are you going to handle that, Naruto? The blonde mute stopped, turned, and eyed the Hokage. Are you going to put back on your clothes if I do? He asked. Yes. Deal. And the two strongest ninja in the village turned in opposite directions and went their separate ways. I wonder if I should alert Itachi. The old man mused. Nah, he'll be fine. X Guy and Kisame were panting as they stared each other down. The two could barely stand as they attempted to catch their breath, but both were far too stubborn to give up. I truly never expected such youth from one like you, Guy muttered. But here is where it all ends. I have one last trick up my sleeve. I was hoping to save this for young Naruto, but it appears that I have no choice. Gate of death, open. And then Kisame knew fear. The green aura slowly turned red as power the likes he had never felt before gushed out of the man before him. His transformation slowly cancelled as Saitama ejected itself from his body. You are a monster. Kisame muttered. His legs wobbled, and then failed him. The monster of the hidden waves collapsed as he took in the incarnation of strength that was now bearing down on him. And you, whoever you are, were a good fight. I will put my life on the line for your defeat, but know that you have beaten me as well. Wait, do you not know my name? Guy stood there, steam emanating from his body, in silence. A few seconds passed before he spoke again. Know that you have beaten me as how do you not know my name? This is literally the only sword like this in existence. I am the only person in the world with blue skin. Guy opened his mouth but didn't get any words out before Kisame started talking again. There are only about 20 ranked shinobi in existence, both dead and alive. How do you not know my name? Guy didn't have an answer to that. Instead he shifted into a stance and prepared his final attack. Kisame's anger was momentarily forgotten as the feeling of death pervaded his very being. Final attack. Night Guak. The red aura dissipated as the green beast was hammered into the ground. The gate of death was cancelled before it could even begin to burn out Guy's life force, and Guy could only mumble as he was quite literally buried face first into the dirt. Tenten stared, eyes wide, as she watched her teacher be defeated by a bop on his head. Naruto looked bored. He stared at his fist, then at the man, and sighed. Well, that was interesting, he muttered. He turned his gaze on the wide-eyed, blue-skinned man. Who are you? Are you the one causing all this noise? It's not nice to disturb the community. Multiple fallen, but not dead, ninjas almost felt the need to get up and stare at the blonde for the blatant hypocrisy, but they hadn't the heart or the energy to do so. Kisame, however, did. He reared up from his place on the ground and snarled. "Oh no, to be overlooked by a monster like that is one thing, but I won't be ignored by a pipsqueak like you. Jinkaruki or not, you will know my name as Kisagurk." Whatever the man was going to say was interrupted as Naruto quite literally passed through him. The shark man choked on his own blood, before looking down. His entire midsection was gone, and his limbs were flying to places he could not keep track of. As his head fell to the ground, only one thought ran through his mind. Was that a punch? And so ended the legacy of the strongest mist swordsman. Naruto sighed. "I hate miscreants. If these people just got a job, we wouldn't have to deal with them all the time." Tenten nodded absently. She picked up Saitama, who was still too shocked to even think about rejecting her, and followed her friend. XXX Sakura wasn't sure how to handle this situation. They had eventually found Itachi, but she wasn't so sure how good of an idea that was. He was sitting on a roof just outside the Uchiha compound, and silently staring at the now abandoned buildings. When the two adolescent ninja touched down on the roof opposite him, the man didn't even blink. Honestly, that should have been Sakura's first red flag. The black flames and endless shuriken should have been the second. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. Psionic shields and fancy martial arts carried the two younger ninja through the brunt of the attacks, but whatever they thought they were ready to do, they weren't. Itachi was a monster, through and through, and predicted every move they made. Even when they just resolved themselves to run, the man had already placed traps to trip them up. Eventually they made it back to where they started, Konoha's main thoroughfare. Clothes singed, cuts festooning their bodies, but they were alive. Itachi looked bored. Tragically so. "I thought you better than your peers, so I deigned to be serious. I see now that it was a fool's decision." Sasuke snarled. He pushed himself up on wobbly arms but eventually fell back to the dirt. Sakura projected the idea of many bad words as hard as she could into the elder Uchiha's mind. Itachi ignored both of them. He closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them they were in that dreaded star form. "This is the Mangekyo Sharingan," the man said. "It will spell your doom. When next you wake, it will be an understanding of the might of a true Uchiha." The man walked forward, and the two younger ninja could do nothing to stop him. Sakura cursed, while Sasuke yelled as hard as he could into the dirt. Both were meaningless, however. They had lost. Itachi was just a few steps away from them when something crashed into the ground between them. The dust cleared quickly this time, and out stepped someone who they were almost excited to see. Almost because they were equally terrified. "Hi," Naruto said. He cracked his neck as he looked around. Wanton destruction littered the street, and both buildings and trees were on fire. This was the status quo for areas where Naruto tread, however, so the orange boy nodded his head and turned to his friends. "How are you?" he asked. Sakura opened her mouth, then closed it. She brought up a hand to maybe gesture at the gravity of the situation, froze, then let that hand fall. She conjured a picture of death and decay and rot and pestilence and made it all in the image of the cloak-wearing man behind him, and still it wasn't enough. So instead Sakura gave up. "Hey," she responded. "I'm doing all right. Bit banged up. How are you?" "I'm doing all right," the boy responded. He had either not picked up on her sarcasm or didn't care for it. "Bit of a long day. Having fun?" Sakura was going to ask a question. Multiple questions. Questions such as, "How could I possibly be having fun?" Or, "Do you not sense the overwhelming aura behind you?" Both of those questions were answered, however, by the simple fact of, "This is Naruto." So Sakura never uttered such words. Instead, she simply nodded, and the blonde monster nodded back. Sasuke yelled his impotent rage into the dirt. "Naruto Uzumaki," Itachi intoned. It was bland and monotone, but it somehow carried in it an undertone of violence. Naruto missed it completely. He turned, saw the same clothing as that other miscreant he handled, and frowned. "Who are you?" the boy asked. Itachi opened his mouth to answer, but a girl running up answered it for him. "Naruto," Tenten yelled. She let Saitama collapse tip first into the dirt before putting her hands on her knees to catch her breath. "Don't go so fast. Normal people can't catch up with Itachi Uchiha." The girl's eyes went wide. She looked from the rogue ninja, to Naruto, and back again. She looked around at the destruction, then to two almost lifeless bodies, and then back to the red-eyed man. She stared him in the eyes fearlessly as she spoke. "Did you do all of this?" Itachi nodded. The girl then looked to Naruto. "Hey, buddy?" Naruto acknowledged her. "You didn't take a good look around here yet, Did ya? Naruto shook his head. Great. I'm gonna go. I got, stuff to do. Would you mind not looking at anything else until I'm, very, very, very far away? Naruto felt the request was odd, but he acquiesced. Great. Tenten chirped. She scooped Saitama out of the dirt, ran over to give Naruto a quick kiss on the cheek, and then bolted. You're the best. She called as she disappeared into the distance. That was weird, Sasuke said around the dirt his face was still buried in. Wanna see what was up with her, Sakura? Already reading her mind, the psychic responded. She went quiet for a few seconds, eyes closed as she focused on the quickly retreating ninja. She then went very, very pale. Sakura's eyes snapped open, then over to one unconscious girl, then another. One had violet hair and was very out of it. The other had pale blonde hair and was in visible pain. Sakura felt her mortality. She looked to Naruto, who seemed intent on not looking at anything at all, then trembled. Sasuke. We have to go. The boy actually pushed himself out of the dirt. What? He asked, enraged. I can't just leave that bastard alive. Sasuke, I need you to think of the bigger picture, Sakura said carefully. Look who's on the ground, right now. I don't care who's out. Sasuke snarled. I need Raven. Sakura shoved the fleeing Kunoichi's thoughts into Sasuke's brain. We need to go. Sasuke backpedaled. He allowed Sakura to pull him up before addressing Naruto. Buddy? We, need to go. That cool? Sure. Cool. Sakura, let's go. And the two young ninjas disappeared via Sakura's psionic powers. Itachi watched as they floated away. He raised a hand to stop them but was blocked by Naruto. The boy had simply appeared in front of the Uchiha Saiyan and threw a punch. Itachi was caught off guard, but he managed to bend out of the way regardless. I have no business with you right now, Jinchuriki, Itachi said. Move and your life will be spared. Naruto didn't respond. He stared at the man, with his weird swirly eyes, and shrugged. The fox, however, didn't share the boy's indifference. Detestable Sharingan. The beast roared. I will wipe their accursed line from this world. They have something to do. It would be rude to interrupt them, Naruto said to the Uchiha. He tried to ignore the fox roaring in his mind, but found it very hard to. He then cleared his ears. The fox really hated Uchihas. Boy, let me lend you my power, just this once. We must erase all traces of this mongrel from the face of this earth. But me taking your power would destroy the village too. I don't see the problem. I like it here. It's interesting. Itachi didn't comment on the boy, or his random mumblings. Instead, he gestured around himself and grunted. Don't you know who I am, or what I've done? Look around you and see my handiwork. Naruto did so. He noted the broken buildings and fallen ninja. I know what you are. You're a hoodlum, with nothing better to do than cause trouble. I won't let you disturb any more people. Itachi had to take a second to devour that information. When he finally did, he opened his mouth to say something, then closed it. He hadn't found the proper words to say. Listen, Naruto started. I don't really feel like fighting right now. We could make things a lot easier for everyone involved if you just... Naruto's eyes fell on Hinata, half buried under rubble and very unconscious. His fist clenched, and hitherto long-forgotten emotions ran through his being. Naruto squashed it as best he could, but he couldn't keep the anger out of his voice. The death of Nekomata annoyed him. This was something else. If you would just leave, now. We won't have to. Naruto's eyes fell on the spasming body of Iko Yamanaka. The very ground cracked as power unrelenting poured from Naruto's very being. The blonde saw red as he zeroed in on the one responsible. The Kyuubi cackled as he felt his chakra being called upon. Itachi flipped through hand seals so quickly that even his own Sharingan saw his hands as a blur. He ended in a horse seal just before taking breath so deep that his chest bulged outwards, becoming visible even on the outside of his baggy Akatsuki cloak. Fire release, Great Destroyer Flame. Itachi released his breath, but instead of air a stream of fire beat onto the ground. The instant it touched it, however, the fire exploded to a width that spanned several blocks of the Konoha thoroughfare. It burned and demolished all in its path, before eventually fizzling out almost a mile away from the young man. Itachi sincerely hoped that everyone had already evacuated. He kept up the technique for just a few seconds. It was chakra-intensive and only really suitable for use by the one who created it, Madara Uchiha. Still, nothing else had worked thus far. Itachi really needed something to work. As the fire dissipated, only scorched earth and the barest remains of house foundations remained. Fire flickered in dusty crevices and heat shimmers distorted the air. This part of Konoha would likely be evacuated for quite some time before anyone found a way to use it again. And yet, somehow, Itachi knew that it wasn't enough. His eyes quivered, quite unsure as to what they were seeing. From the ashes of the world came the orange nightmare. His clothes were singed, his skin patterned black with soot. But he was fine. No substantial damage had been incurred. If anything, the boy only seemed angrier. Naruto didn't waste any time. His knees bent, and the world cried as he rocketed from his place several meters away from the Uchiha. Itachi didn't waste any time thinking about it, either. Last time he took a second to think in this fight he almost lost his head. No, the rogue Uchiha dodged to the side. The orange warhead blitzed past him. The earth broke apart where he passed. Itachi grunted as the mere act of the boy missing created a shockwave that hit him like a train. Every nerve in his body screamed as he was battered away, and it was only years of training that allowed him to instinctually roll to absorb the momentum of the blow. When he finally came to a stop he was several broken bones more wary. Red eyes cautiously looked to follow the blonde. Dull blue eyes stared back. Naruto stood at the end of a crater created by him. The devastation continued deep into the bedrock below in a straight line from where the boy started his attack to where he currently stood. Itachi gaped. It was all he could do. "What are you?" the man asked. Naruto didn't bother with an answer. If he had, Itachi wasn't fast enough to catch it. The boy blurred from existence once again, and it was all Itachi could do to dodge the haymaker that almost smacked into his chest. The shockwave of that punch was much smaller, but it continued well past where his fist stopped. I can't get hit, and I can't stay in the path of his punches either, Itachi thought. His Sharingan tracked every minute twitch of the boy's muscles. From that alone he predicted what Naruto was going to do next. It was that knowledge, and only that knowledge, that allowed him to dodge the next swing. Itachi ducked this time. Naruto's swing went high. The shockwave carried on and broke off the top of the Hokage monument. Itachi didn't bother to look back to gauge the damage. Every attack was lethal. On Naruto's end things weren't as complicated. Where Itachi ducked and moved like a leaf in the wind, he held no such fancy inclination. Swing with left, straight with right. Attacks came simply and telegraphed, but with all the speed of a bullet. It was all Itachi could do to maintain the dance that spared his life. Of course, the elder Uchiha retaliated. Jabs were returned in the spaces between Naruto's deadly strikes. Nothing ever mattered, however. The boy took the strikes as if they weren't even connecting, and soon enough Itachi had abandoned the endeavor. He focused on staying alive under the barrage of attacks that didn't slow even after a straight minute of throwing them. Eventually the strain of constantly moving and predicting got to the young man. Itachi faltered, for just a second, and Naruto's punch connected with his chest. Instead of being blown into countless pieces of gore and viscera, however, the Uchiha exploded into crows. Naruto watched them as they flapped their wings and cawed, most likely in an attempt to disorient him. He then reached forward, seemingly into thin air, and grabbed at nothing. The space he grabbed, which seemed to be empty, cracked under his hold. The blonde then proceeded to squeeze, and reality itself seemed to fold. Eventually the world broke and fell away, and what remained was another world where Itachi was once again launching large amounts of flame at him. Naruto stared as the fireballs rushed towards him. He didn't know any jutsu, but he knew how to punch things. So he did. Serious series, serious punch. XXX Sasuke stumbled as the world shook. This was the third time that such a thing happened in the last 5 minutes, and each time it did Sasuke had to brace himself on all fours in an attempt to stay upright. He hadn't succeeded the other times either. Sakura at least had the ability to float, however shaky her psionic flight was at the moment. She wobbled in the air with each earthquake that shook the village, but she too fell to the ground when the gusts of air blew through the streets. It seemed that Naruto was finally getting serious. It was a terrifying thought. Having any luck waking them up? Sasuke asked. Before him stood Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburame. They were both carrying a girl, Hinata and Aiko respectively, and they were both trying their level hardest to awaken the two girls. They weren't having the best of luck. I don't understand how the hell they could remain asleep through all of this, Kiba yelled. Houses crumbled under the ambient damage that was radiating outwards from the legendary fight happening in the middle of the village. Luckily everyone had already been evacuated towards the edges of the village, but from the way things were going, the entire village would have to be abandoned. I don't know about Hinata, but the Yamanaka was put under a Sharingan Genjutsu. It's going to take a lot more than this to break her out of it. Sasuke walked over to the blonde, enduring the minor quakes all the while. He pried open her eyes and stared into them. He tried activating his Sharingan to see into her soul, but the girl was too far gone. His Sharingan wasn't strong enough to pierce through to where she had retreated into. "It's no use," he said, a deep frown joining his furrowed brow. "I can't undo the damage." "Well, you're going to have to try." Kiba snarled. "They're the only ones who can stop Naruto right now. If we don't stop him, he's going to destroy the whole village." "I don't see you doing anything productive," Sasuke yelled back. "Unless you think that screaming in the poor girl's ear anymore is going to do it." Throughout their arguments, Shino turned to Sakura, something that the pink-haired psychic immediately took note of. The two locked eyes, and an entire conversation took place in the span of 3 seconds. He shuffled the blue-haired girl over to her and waited. Sakura looked at the Hyuga heiress. Face set into a grim determination, the psychic stared until she found something useful. With a nod, the Haruno allowed her psychic powers to activate once more. Her eyes went aglow with her ability, and her hair rose on the bed of her psionics. Slowly, Sakura raised her hand. When she brought it back down, there was a resounding smack that rang through the area. Everyone looked on in awe as Sakura repeatedly slapped her fellow kunoichi. "Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up!" Sakura chanted. "Wake up, wake up! I thought you were going to use your psychic powers," Shino said quietly. Sakura spared him a second's consideration before going back to her assault. "I am using my psychic powers," she responded. "I couldn't smack her hard enough without them. Wake the fuck up!" This slapping continued for several more seconds before a calloused hand rose to stop her. Hinata was awake, and judging from the glare on her active Byakugan, she wasn't happy. "I cannot properly express in words how infuriated I am right now." "Oh good," Sakura said, either unaware or uncaring of the Hyuga's bad mood. "Now that you're up, you can stop Naruto. I will turn your insides to paste. And while you're at it, see if you can get him to help fix the village. I will use your hair to knit myself some nice pink gloves to use while I bury your body. Oh, can you wake up the Yamanaka too? No one will find your unmarked grave." "Excellent. While you do that, I'll try to limit the casualties." And like that, Sakura was off, floating on a wave of her own psychic power. Hinata didn't even blink. She stumbled over to the Yamanaka and started analyzing her. Sasuke, Kiba and Shino stared at one another before shrugging. They wouldn't question the logic of girls. Triple X Itachi felt something inside of him break. The pain was sharp and obvious, blossoming somewhere in his chest, before creeping outwards like rainwater through cracks in the pavement. Naruto had landed a hit on him, had kept moving despite the genjutsu, and successfully backhanded him through a building. The building collapsed around him and a hastily applied substitution had him switch with a rock. He was out of danger from the broken house, but he was immediately in danger to something far worse. Itachi bent backwards, and a rock barely a pebble zipped past where his head was. It continued to pierce everything in its path before breaking somewhere far off in the distance. That pebble was the only warning that Naruto gave before continuing their dance, and Itachi didn't bother to waste it. He was already flowing around a barrage of attacks that destroyed the very landscape with each miss. "Death is too good for you," Naruto said. His words weren't fevered or rushed. He spoke with a calm temperance that betrayed the ferocity of his blows. "Stop moving so I can kill you." Itachi turned, keeping his eye on the boy. The Uzumaki's punch went far, and the ground behind him crumbled. "I don't think I'll do that." Itachi then brought his hands together. He attempted to use a jutsu, but the boy didn't seem to want to allow him that luxury anymore. A flash in those blue eyes was all of the warning that he got before Naruto seemed to blur. To blur to the eyes of the Sharingan was an impressive, and frightening, feat. From the moment that the boy moved, Itachi knew that something was horribly wrong. The entire fight, from the very beginning, the boy seemed to be moving awkwardly. He never moved with much grace. No, his form was sloppy, and his moves were wasteful. But even then, something about his movements always seemed stiff. Itachi knew now that the boy was holding back. A flurry of blows, so fast as to seem simultaneous, rained down on the Uchiha. His Sharingan registered them, but there was nothing that Itachi could do to stop them. He moved his legs, his arms, hell, he moved his eyelids, but nothing seemed to be enough. The boy would eliminate him from the face of the earth, leaving not even a splattered smear to note his passing. As the barrage of blows reached ever so nearer, there was only one thing that came to the poor Uchiha's mind. Death. Triple X Sasuke wasn't sure what Hinata Hyuga did to the girl, but whatever it was involved a lot of staring, and even more ability-enhanced slaps. He was sure that whatever it was that the girls were so fond of doing was, in fact, not a medical surety. but the fact that it kept working meant that he couldn't call them out on it. The Yamanaka's hand shot out and gripped Hinata's wrist before it could slap her with a gentle fist slap. Her eyes were droopy and her chest heaved with every breath, but she was awake. My mind was stuck in a trauma and chakra-induced coma, and I could still feel your slaps, the blonde said. Her eyes, as half-lighted as they were, managed to level the fierce glare on the Hyuga. I hope you know that this means death for you. Whether Hinata gave no merit to the threats or simply did not care, she spoke her next words with a cheerful exuberance. Oh good, you're up. I need your help in calming down Naruto. What? Aiko asked. Why is he upset? He thought we were dead. He thought we were what? Sasuke cut in. Yeah, this is nice and all, but there is currently a warhead destroying our city and we need nothing less than the combined power of the two of you to stop it. So, if you could stop the banter and save us that would be nice. Sasuke's sarcasm was thick enough to be cut by a kunai, and he regretted using none of it. Still, the glare he received from both girls was downright venomous. He endured it for a few seconds without faltering, and the girls eventually relented. They turned from him with a huff and stared out towards where the wanton destruction was taking place. Well, it seems like we have to save the world. Again. I always knew little Naruto would be the death of me. And the two were off, blurring away with the speed of a kunoichi. Sasuke watched them go. Then he turned. He made his way towards the edge of the village where he knew that a hotel would be open. The owner was a mean money-mongerer and would take every chance to earn another buck. He would take Sasuke's money and give him the rest he deserved. XXX Naruto was furious. It was a burning thing that consumed every inch of his body. It moved his fists to destroy, never mind the consequences, and he felt all too happy to oblige. The earth crumbled, houses collapsed, and the sky was rent asunder with every attack that landed. And every attack landed, even if not on the delinquent in front of him. The terrain changed with every punch, forcing the Uchiha to constantly change his tactics on the fly. And in the end, it still wasn't enough. The man somehow evaded all of his attacks and countered. His attacks were little more than butterfly kisses, but they were annoying nonetheless. Eventually Naruto got fed up and switched to being serious. The Uchiha wasn't prepared. He was caught off guard and would finally die. Then something happened. Purple chakra exploded from him, forming a literal giant suit of armor. It covered the man like some kind of giant mech, stopping Naruto's punch dead. The armor cracked where his fist connected, but it was the fact that it survived that broke Naruto out of his frenzy. What? Naruto asked. He pushed against the armor, but it continued to resist his fist. Thesis Susanoo, Itachi said around desperate gasps of breath. Dark red, nearly black blood flowed from his eyes. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan's ultimate technique. You can't break through. Naruto wasn't so sure about that. Though the cracks in the armor were starting to mend, he was sure he could break it again. After finding purchase on the ground, he reared his fist back once more. Itachi, apparently, didn't like that idea. Faster than he could blink, the Susanoo forged a spectral sword and swiped at him. Naruto's arm pivoted from cocked back to a block, and the sword hit him with all the force of a train. He was sent careening through several buildings, before finally coming to rest almost half a mile away. Naruto pushed the debris off and stood. His clothing was ruined, but that was nothing new. Boy, the fox growled. His voice was rough and curt, showing the irritation that was building the entire fight. Take my power. The bastard needs to be destroyed. I can take care of that perfectly fine by myself. You can, the fox said. But you aren't. Just take my power and be done with the blight. In his eyes, you're probably the blight. Well, he's not the one on your side. And you are? The fox remained silent. I'm not against you, he finally said. That must count for something. Naruto didn't reply. His knees bent. When they straightened, he was propelling through the air. XXX Itachi was not having a good day. The boy had broken his Susanoo, something that had never been done before. He had to break it out or die, and the strain on his eyes was almost too much. Still, it was necessary. He pulled himself and his construct out of the divot that the Uzumaki had punted him into, then looked around. It was quiet. Far too quiet for a battlefield housing a living catastrophe. Itachi had maybe 3 more seconds of thought before the world exploded again. An armored hand raised and caught the flying kick of the blonde menace. The Susanoo arm cracked and broke, but most of the momentum of the attack had been absorbed. The boy landed the construct's shoulder and stared into the skeleton warrior's glowing eyes. He cocked a fist back. Itachi wasn't letting another of those go off. His right eye bled, and black fire erupted on the boy's arm. Naruto didn't even look at it. He tore off the arm of his jacket and tossed it away. The sleeve burned to dust on the ground, but that was the extent of the damage from his attack. Still, it allowed a moment of hesitation, and in that moment Itachi brought his sword down on the boy once more. Naruto was cleaved into the ground, and for a moment Itachi dared to hope. That hope died when his sword was slowly pushed from the crevice he had buried it in. "Is this all you've got?" Naruto asked. "Because if it is, you are disappointing." Itachi cursed underneath his breath. He taxed his already waning chakra reserves and reformed his Susanoo's arm. Now with two, he managed to push the sword down a bit more. That progress was immediately nullified. Naruto didn't even bother to use another hand. He just used the one to continue to push his way out of the crevice. "What are you?" Itachi screamed, his voice strained with the effort of trying to keep the boy down. Naruto turned his attention from the blade that even now couldn't pierce the skin of his hand, to the overworked Uchiha staring at him from within the translucent suit of armor. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he said. He squeezed, ever so slightly, and the blade in his hand broke into shards. The shock of it overtaxed Itachi's already bleeding eyes, and the young man collapsed to the ground, his chakra fading around him. The rogue Uchiha tried to return to his feet, but the fatigue had finally caught up to him. His arms gave out, sending him face first into the dirt. Naruto stopped right before him. His face was as impassive as a blank wall. "It's over." The Uchiha wondered if it was too late to mention that they were on the same side. "You killed my friends. Well, knocked out one and put the other in again jutsu." Both were terrible choices on his part, but not nearly as bad as death. Still, he supposed that the boy didn't know that. Naruto raised his arm, and Itachi could feel the death emanating from it. "I'll try to make this quick." Itachi could tell that he probably wouldn't feel a thing. Still, he closed his eyes. He was meant to die by Sasuke's hands, but dying to a superior opponent wasn't a bad ending for a ninja either. He heard the displacement of air as the boy's fist swung down on him. He prepared himself for death, but it surprisingly didn't come. The earth was kicked up and gusts of wind almost blew him away. He opened his eyes to see the nightmare boy with his fist outstretched. His eyes were wide, however, as he stared down the blue-haired girl that stood between them. "Hinata?" he asked, and his voice was very clearly in awe. He took a look at his fist, then quickly retracted it as if it were the vilest of weapons. "Yes, it's me, Naruto." Hinata spoke with a calm voice. She looked the monster in his eyes as she spoke. "I'm not dead." Naruto trembled. His hand reached forward and cupped the Hyuga's cheek. The girl put her hand over his, and the smile she gave as she leaned into the boy's touch was nothing short of angelic. "Yes, I'm alive. You can stop destroying the village now." From the look in Naruto's eyes, it almost worked. The impassive stare that hid so much rage under the surface had melted away to a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He looked like he so desperately wanted to just hold her and walk away. Something popped up in his mind, however, as if something was whispering into his ear, and that rage was back. He snarled, and his hand tore away from Hinata's cheek and shoved her aside. Hinata, being a ninja, didn't mind the roughhousing. She was confused by it though, if the frown was anything to go by. "What's wrong?" she asked. She stepped in front again, and this time Naruto didn't move her. "He killed Aiko." The sheer rage on the boy's face seriously had Itachi considering just spilling the secret. "Tch," Hinata sucked her teeth. "And? She's my friend. So am I." Those words seemed to spark something in Naruto. "Yeah, you are?" And once again, the Hyuga was confused. She looked to Naruto rub the boy's head as if he were a particularly slow puppy. "What? Of course I am. What kind of question is that?" Naruto didn't say anything. His mouth hung open, but that's it. "If anything, we're best friends. We used to spend every day together, didn't we?" Naruto, once again, didn't say anything. The girl huffed, then took the boy's hand. "We're best friends. Okay?" Naruto nodded. "Okay. So let's go." "But... Aiko." The Hyuga huffed again. She puffed out her cheeks like an adorable balloon and turned away. "Not that it means anything, but she's fine too." Itachi could see the change happen. XXX it was like ice water was poured down his back. It quelled the raging fires and stemmed his anger. A certain shine returned to his eyes, and it was like an oppressive aura had dissipated. The birds had started to chirp once more in their far-off groves and the sun seemed to shine brighter. "She's okay?" Hinata didn't look too happy at his relief, but she nodded anyway. "Yes. The Yamanaka is fine. The only reason she isn't here is because she just got out her coma and couldn't run as fast without being dizzy." "Out of her what now?" Naruto asked. The oppressive aura was back, and the rogue Uchiha had tried his best to bury himself. Doesn't matter, Hinata replied. There was enough collateral damage. She's fine, we're leaving. Let's go. Not one to be needed to be told things twice, the boy followed his blue-haired friend faithfully. Wait, Itachi muttered. He had pulled himself up from the ground. He was posted on one knee and panting, but he was up. That's it? You're done? Naruto turned around. He tilted his head and frowned. Yeah. You didn't kill them, so I guess it's okay. Don't cause any more trouble, okay? Itachi looked around. Destruction and decay littered every waking mile. Most of the demolition was from the boy in front of him, but Itachi didn't have guts to bring that up. Okay, he said. Then I'll just be going now? Naruto nodded. He moved to turn around and leave the man. Then a knife plunged through the Uchiha's chest. My Maj. The voice drawled. It was a smooth timbre but entirely too smug. The words were pulled out long and taunting. Looks like little Itachi couldn't quite pull off his job. Something in Naruto froze. Chills ran up his spine in a way that had never happened before. Deep within him, in the part where his demon lay, something wicked and primal burned. This voice, the fox said, its voice low and menacing. There was steel there, akin to a carefully honed blade, that told Naruto that the fox was just a moment away from tearing away at all in its path. I know this voice. I know this chakra. It is the tainted chakra of that Uchiha. It is the pupil of that man. Naruto's fists clenched. Anger that was not his own was pumping adrenaline into his body. He tried to hold back the emotions, but the fox was feeling them all too strongly. That man. He is the one, boy. He is the one we must kill. Calm down, Naruto muttered through grit teeth. He was strong enough to resist the chakra, but it was a labor when the fox was this adamant. We'll get him. Meanwhile the two Uchiha were in a standoff. Itachi was far too tired to the masked man, but he refused to go down. I always knew that you would betray me, Itachi said around the blood dripping from his mouth. Dirty. Traitor. The man chuckled, his spiral orange mask jostling with every move he made. I would be a fool not to, Itachi. There aren't many who could oppose me, so it would only make sense that I dispose of the ones who could. No hard feelings, right? And without any posturing he used his foot to kick the exhausted Uchiha off of the black metal rod he shoved through his chest. Itachi fell in a crumpled heap to the floor, but not without shooting one last glare at the man behind him. A flash of red, and then black, and the Uchiha Saiyan's eyes slowly drifted shut. So much potential, the masked man drawled. Wasted in loyalty to such a disgusting village. Honestly, I'm glad about what you've done remodeling. Destroyed is such a good look for the Hidden Leaf. Naruto felt a spark of his own anger rise in his gut, but he held himself back. Hinata, however, didn't have that reluctance. Who are you? The Hyuga asked. The veins around her eyes bulged as she stared down the man in front of them. What do you want? The man gasped and clutched at the black robe over where his heart would be. Such venom from such a cute little princess. Almost makes me want to pluck your eyes right out. Naruto didn't even blink. His hand shot out and caught the masked man's wrist. Hinata, not having seen the man move, stumbled backwards before tripping on her own feet. She scuttled back still before leaping back to her feet. Naruto, however, hadn't moved. His hand squeezed on the masked man's wrist hard enough to crush diamonds, but the man didn't relent. He just stared into Naruto's eyes using his own red one that peeked through a hole in the spiral. My, the man drawled. Fast, aren't we? Naruto didn't respond. He started to squeeze harder. But are you fast enough? The man asked. Though Naruto couldn't see it, he felt the man's sneer. The man casually pulled his hand out of Naruto's grip, his skin phasing through Naruto's own, before turning around. You've saved your blue-haired friend, and kudos to you on that, but have you saved your fellow blonde? The dam burst. It didn't take a genius to figure out who the masked man was talking about. Vicious red chakra burst from the boy, flaring up like unholy golden flame. Where is Aiko? XXX if words alone could cow a person, that would be the quality of Naruto's voice. The people across all of the Land of Fire found an unspeakable pressure weighing down on them, forcing them to their knees. What? Sasuke gasped. It was hard to even breathe. Across from him, the other people in the hotel were either unconscious or well on their way. XXX the ground buckled underneath him, but he hadn't cared. Behind him Hinata was trying desperately to stay awake. From the looks of things, she was losing that battle. The man in front of him, Toby, if the fox was correct, didn't seem to be affected at all, however. He stood, spine straight, as he stared down the embodiment of the apocalypse. "TSK, he tutted, his playful demeanor still present. "That is for a later time." "No." Naruto snarled. "It is for right now." And like that the boy was on him. A golden fist moved almost instantly through the air, igniting it before impacting Tobi's masked face. Like before, however, the man seemed to phase through it. The punch went wide. And everything in the way of it for several miles ceased to exist. "Nuh-uh," Tobi chanted. "Your punches won't work on me." He then proved his point by walking through Naruto, body and all. Naruto tried to grab at him, he did, but everything was ineffectual. "Even with the Nine Tails chakra, you're just throwing punches." He gestured out towards the destroyed village. "Devastating, to be sure, but not good enough. You're going to need to be so much stronger if you want to protect yourself from what I have coming for you." The man then bowed, to both Naruto's and the fox's great anger. "And you're going to have to be stronger if you want to get your little friend back. Kaio for now, little Naruto. And I'll see you in the next story of our lives." A vortex started to swirl, centering on the man's exposed eye. His body started to be sucked into it and Naruto, never one to let an opportunity slip away, threw a claw of chakra from the cloak that surrounded his body. It reached most of the way before being swatted away. "I'm afraid not," a gravelly voice said. "Your opponent is us." "Oi, oi. How much do you think his bounty is?" Between Naruto and the masked man stood two more people in black and red cloaks. One was a hunchback with what seemed to be a plaited tail coming from his back. The other seemed to have been stitched together with string. "We'll meet again, little Naruto," the masked man chanted gleefully. "We'll meet again." And like that he was gone. The fox roared. No. He cannot escape. But he already had. They both knew it. Naruto felt like crying. He couldn't follow the man through whatever portal he had escaped through. For the first time in a long time, he was powerless to do something. A needle evaporated in the cloak of his corrosive chakra. Naruto looked up to see the hunchback with his hand extended. "Did you forget about us?" Naruto felt a wicked smile grow across his face. "No," he said calmly. "I hadn't." XXX Sasuke wasn't sure what he was expecting when he came to ground zero of the fight. He was expecting carnage, blood and lots of dead Uchiha bits. There was semi-dead Uchiha bleeding out near a crater, but the bits of person scattered around didn't belong to him. No, the bits of person seemed to be almost all alike. "What happened here?" the younger Uchiha asked. He carefully stepped over the surprisingly realistic parts to make it closer to where he saw the fading embers of a golden flame. He stopped just a few meters away from the boy and waited in silence for the flames to die out. Never did it occur to him to ask what that ability was. "I've never went out of my way to cause trouble," he said. Near his feet were the remains of two bodies. One was broken to pieces like many of the other dolls spread haphazardly around the place, but in its chest was a bloody mass of viscera. The other body seemed to be strips of unzipped skin. "I caused trouble, but never to anyone important. I always tried to be neutral." Naruto turned, and Sasuke felt his heart clench when he saw the wetness in the boy's eyes. "Why did they take her?" Sasuke opened his mouth, but he found that he didn't have the right words to say. His jaw shut, and by the time he found the energy to open it again several minutes had passed. "Naruto," he started. "Because they were monsters," Sakura said. She floated into the clearing with a 2x4 trapped in the throes of her psionics. "They're maniacs and insane criminals who want nothing but to watch the world burn." The psychic gestured around her. "If this isn't enough to show you how deranged they are, I'm not sure what more you need." "They're not the kind to need reason," Hinata said. She walked up behind Naruto and before he could react, she wrapped her arms around the boy. "They do because they can, and no other reason. They're right bastards, if you ask me," Kiba snarled. Beside him, propping the real one onto his shoulder, was the beast mimicry clone. The Kiba clone barked their assent. "But their reasoning doesn't matter," Sasuke said. "What matters is what we do from now on." "We have taken." Hinata punched Sasuke in the shoulder. He winced and continued. "You have taken down a monster today. That's a cause for celebration. And if you can do it once, you can do it again. And if you think Kaiko's gonna die, you're wrong," Kiba yelled. "They're using her as bait. All we have to do is get stronger, hunt them down, and break her out, yeah?" Naruto seemed to relax ever so slightly. He held out his arms, and it was apparent he was expecting the group hug. The ones that weren't already hugging him suddenly seemed apprehensive. I gotta go back to fixing the village. I gotta get to the vet. My mom is calling me." Their excuses were useless, however. Naruto was far too fast for them to escape. He caught them all and brought them into a hug before they could even blink. They were, of course, wary of being hugged by a person who could single-handedly demolish the village, but after several seconds of them not being squished to death they calmed. Eventually they even started to hug back, and soon they were all hugging each other in silence. It was a beautiful, heartwarming moment. Then the Hokage walked in. "What have you done to my village?" And then it was a heart-stopping moment.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.